My name is Catherine Murray. I'm just absolutely honored to be here tonight. I would like to thank you all for coming. I would like to thank my co-panelists. And I can tell that the secret behind the Philosopher's Cafe is never knowing what you're going to be, what to expect. And so I come from Simon Fraser University. I'm the chair of the department there, one of the first departments in Canada in women's studies, and one that also led the charge in changing its name to Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies. I'm trained as a professor in political studies and political communication. And so when I assume Graham threw the challenge for us to think, has feminism become a dirty word? That's where I decided to start. So tonight what I'm going to do is ask if feminism has become a dirty word and suggest some of the social forces around us and the political trends that are around us and what I encounter every day with the students that I meet. And I'm going to end up with a plea pretty much as my co-panelists have. So I think it's very hard in a world where we have Rush Limbaugh with the polarization of political speech and the rise of organizations like Fox News in Canada. It's really a place where anything can happen. I believe that we have to constantly fight to prevent feminism, in quotations, from becoming a dirty word. I do not think Canada has fallen prey to the same kind of attack from the right on feminism as has the United States. And I think we know from the surveys of Canadians of the kind that political scientist Elizabeth Giddingill, who wrote a wonderful little book called Citizens, has produced, that there is less of a gender gap on attitudes to support gender equality in Canada than we might expect. But what do we really know about the women who are willing to self-identify as a feminist in a survey? First of all, we know that the majority of women choose not to self-identify as a feminist. In the United States, where perhaps it's the most politically brave act to self-identify, studies show just between 11 and 27% will say that they are a feminist. But to avoid such identification does not necessarily mean one is anti-feminist. Indeed, support for basic notions of gender equality of opportunity, freedom of harassment, just by reason of gender is very strong all across North America. We know that education, we know that employment, we know that urban status, the simple accident of living in a city, tends to increase the claim to feminism or self-identification, while religion may, under some circumstances, abate it. We still know far too little about the rate that women of color identify with feminism. Political scientists are beginning to suggest that there is a continuum of attitudes about feminism which are most important to explore. In a groundbreaking study which tries to correct for a simple binary feminist or not feminist, or anti-feminist if you like, by asking questions about feminist identity, gender role attitudes, workplace attitudes towards discrimination, attitudes towards abortion or same-sex marriage, the authors O'Neill, Giddingill, and Young, who produced a wonderful little piece in 2008, have found that just over 7 in 10 women in English Canada will identify as feminists. The bad news is that most, that is soft feminists, may be as high as 47% in this country, and strong feminists number just 25%. So the news is that younger women are far less likely, half as likely, to adopt a strong version of feminist identification as their elders today. So I have to ask myself, since I'm in the business of teaching young women and men, why are young women in particular more apt to be passive supporters than agents of change? And I believe there are a number of reasons. Is there a perception that the need for feminism is over? I think, unfortunately, despite the issues that have been raised by my colleagues, there is somewhat of a perception that the need is over. From the same study, we know that poorer women, or women of color, see the need for further advancement of social justice in Canada. They know that women are much more likely to live as single mothers, to live alone as frail elderly, or to live below the poverty line because they live it every day. But many young women in Canada do not see the gender consequences of winning and losing in capitalist economies today. Like their young male counterparts, the generation of the millennials today is more individualistic, materialistic than previous ones, according to survey companies like Environics. They see occasional female winners or stars in the political and economic universes. They see breakthrough politicians, whether it is Christy Clark or Alison Redford, as the premiers of British Columbia or Alberta. What they don't see is the low incidence of women in cabinet at the federal level. They do not see that we have not broken through the 25% barrier of representation in federal politics for a long, long time. And at present rate of progress, we will not do so for another 50 to 100 years. And most importantly, they do not see or question why there is a male mayor and all male council elected in the last municipal election here in Port Coquitlam. They see Christine Day, head of Lululemon. They see the young CEOs like Laurie Ann Goldman of Spanx or Christine Lagarde as head of the World Bank. And they think this is representative of great gains when the facts are far, far worse. Catalyst, the business organization that studies the progress in business, says that we have not broken through 17% of our upper ranks in businesses in the top financial post 500, and that it will take 800 years to do so, and that rising young professional women are leaving businesses in droves to start their own business, or turned off by the glass ceiling, or what some call the glass elevator, or the labyrinth of advancement. Is there a perception that we are rewriting history with such cases? I think there is. And I think we have failed our young women. Feminism has been written nostalgically into our history books. Stories about the group of 5 female suffragettes with statuaries to them on Parliament Hill in Ottawa, or stories about the abortion caravan of hippies from Vancouver, fighting Pierre Elliott Trudeau so satisfactorily. And it has tended to focus around rights, equality of opportunity. Well, on the face of it, young women today say we have those rights to equality of opportunity written into our Constitution, into our UN Convention on Human Rights, which are supposed to be binding on all 150 signatories. And tell that to women in the Middle East or in countries like Sudan or Syria. I think there are 3 problems with this kind of tendency to think we're ahead and that we're achieving some new liberal promise of equality of opportunity. The first is that focusing on equality of right is not equality of condition. We have to look at the social, economic, and quality of life outcomes or consequences of gender. Women continue to be restricted in their economic life chances, poorer, make on average less than men, and we've discovered that our female artists make probably amongst the least of all. Restricted in the zones they can walk with comfort on our public streets, and much more prone to sexual harassment, even while on the way somewhere during a Canucks game downtown, for example, or afraid to walk in the entertainment district downtown on Granville. And we have to especially face up to the colonial consequence that Aboriginal women and youth are 10 times more likely to experience gender violence than many of us. We have to be aware of the impact of race and disability on basic human security and the right to life and enjoyment in our communities, on our streets, even in our homes next door. There are still far too many inequalities today. We know that the Occupy Vancouver group brought attention to the 1% and the 99% and lamented the growing gap between rich and poor. But do we know that this leaderless group, when it was working with Pivot Legal Society to get the courts to recognize its rights to stay in the public area around the Vancouver Art Gallery, do we know that group was mostly male? This inequality, this growing income insecurity, the high level of youth unemployment, the systemic marginalization of our Aboriginal youth, this is not a Canada I want to live in, and this is not the Canada I saw as a second-generation academic, coming of age in a university, as Graham has identified, run mostly by guys. We are not giving the tools to our young women and helping them move from the position of soft progressive to strong feminist one. The second problem I see is that we are not building allies between men and women in our political system today. We do not have a young group of women who are prepared to settle for feminism that is just a female burden. They do not want exclusionary feminism. They want to see gender, that is, the reflection of the fights for equality must involve both men and women and must stretch rights beyond the typical heterosexual vision of sexual orientation. They must include gay and lesbian rights and even anticipate the need to move beyond to queer and transgendered rights. The third problem I want to raise tonight is that there is a terrible tendency, if we fail to look at equality of condition and circumstance within Canada, to ask what is fair and sustainable society around us, and if we fail to build allies, men, women, gay, straight, old, young, white, multiracial, able, and disabled, then feminism has failed in its progressive agenda. Because there is a great tendency today for us to think all the problems of social advancement are those of the failed states, the Islamic fundamentalist states, or those of others. My Turkish-Canadian colleague at Simon Fraser University, Özlem Sensoy, in the Department of Education, has called this the tendency to the global helper girl. She sees it everywhere. She sees it in the corridors of every middle school and every high school in the Lower Mainland area. The global helper girl. Let's take care of those Afghani women in schools over there right away. First, while laudable, this tendency to global feminism has a kind of quick fix for guilt or the inability to do something at home. If feminism has become a dirty word, and I can tell you I do not want it to be one, then it is because we have let it get worn down by the right on the political landscape, too vulnerable to attack as a special interest, too easy to address the social economic stories of professional advancement and representation, equality without substantive social justice consideration. I believe we have to make the term feminism relevant to young women, and we have to cloak our revival of political consciousness in the context of a world gone mad with Facebook, a terrible new game or website entitled amiugly.com, where young women are posting their faces there to be rated, and the reality that more than 70% of our youth today are bullied in our schools around us for lookism, male or female. And the sexual violent rates, far from what Rona Ambrose may tell us, are not falling. They are rising. They are changing form. And they are just not reported or acted upon by the police. But there are signs of hope, I believe. Our department, which has been struggling for relevance with the decline of feminism all around us, has changed its name to Gender, Sexuality, and Women's Studies. I'm proud to say our enrollments are up 40%, and we now can count among our students about 20% guys. Not enough, but I keep working on it. We have courses on misogyny, on masculinity, on violence against women and disableism, something called cripping the norm, which our young students are having a wonderful time going out with flash mobs on. Cripping the norm, women in business, politics. We have to talk about these things very much as you are here tonight. We are forging new coalitions with gender anti-violence groups locally. reaching out in new ways, and our students have produced a fabulous video which is called Walk a Mile BC Style. If you Google it, it's intended to reach out to young males across the Lower Mainland and ask them to get involved with anti-violence campaigns. We believe there is a renaissance of interest out there, a wave of new feminism seeking expression in Canada. Enchanted perhaps by the youth of the Orange Crush and the many elected, particularly from Quebec, who are so many fresh faces, young women in hope in Parliament Hill. They are seeking hope, but they are not afraid to tackle the injustices of this generation before they saddle the next. Thank you.